To import an image directly into Photoshop, one of the options under File down to import, is images from a device. And in this case, the device we have is the scanner that we're using. And if you install the device correctly on your computer, usually it comes with a driver, it comes with its own software, it should be showing up. And in this case, it's the Epson Perfection V19. It does give you a couple of options. You can hear it going. It'll automatically start scanning once you do it. While it's scanning, you can see some of the options that are over here, like what kind of scan do you want to be, a color or black and white, what's the resolution. You can choose a specific size, you can choose the format and where you want to save it to. All of those are very important things to pay attention to. The first scan that it'll do is just a quick preview scan, just to show you what you're working with. Especially if you're doing a variety of different things, sometimes you just want to scan one particular area. This will let you do this. I'm going to do the whole thing. What would be a good resolution to scan something at? 200, 300? If printing resolution, a good printing resolution is like 300, always scan larger than what you need to print. So 600, 800, 1,000, something manageable. But anything above 300 tends to be best. Of course, if you're working on screen graphics, anything above 72. I tend to go for 600 DPI for my resolution that I'm working with. As far as where it's going to scan to, I'm just going to put it on my desktop, and I'll keep it as a JPEG. TIFF is also really good. PNG will pick up your transparency, which we don't have. When I hit scan, oh, please select the scan area. I'm sorry. You do need to highlight the area that you want. So there it is. I clicked and dragged. Now let's scan it. Give it just a second. Since I increased the resolution, it's going to scan slower. That's how it picks it up. It just moves slower to get more resolution from here. This is actually pretty fast for a good one. And you can see now it imported directly into my, my document that I created. One thing that I did skip over, what mode am I working in? Grayscale mode, not RGB, not CMYK. That's because the mode I was working in was black and white. If I did want to get color, it would be RGB format. I should have chosen color. Since it doesn't have color, it really won't matter for what we're doing. But this will import it, directly into Photoshop. If you do need to add color for whatever reason, remember you can go to Image and change your image mode to RGB, and this will allow you to add color to that document. Following along in your instructions, here's what we're going to do. You're going to make something that's going to be useful, so let's say for a desktop background. And so in this case, I'm giving it to you as a pixel-based document. File and New. Make sure your format is in pixels. What's my size should be? What's the width? 2560. The height? 1440. I don't give a resolution. Why don't I give a resolution?
Because you already got your resolution when you scanned it.
Nope. It has nothing to do with the scan.
Is it because it's pixels?
Because it's pixels, yeah. I'm measuring in pixels. It doesn't matter how many pixels per inch. I'm measuring in pixels. If it's inches, that's different. So I'm going to keep my resolution at 72. Yeah, so that's pretty much all you need to know about that. And as far as the background, usually we keep it white. I'm going to make it transparent this time. You'll see why in just a second. We'll say OK to this. And so this is kind of a standard screen wallpaper size if you're working on a large Macintosh system. So we'll pretend like we're making a screen resolution. Since I chose transparent, you can see I got my little checkerboard pattern. The first thing I need to do is to fill it in with a solid color. You know I don't like to use my fill bucket tool. I'm going to use a fill layer to do this. Layer, new fill layer, choose a solid. And I've been told I use a lot of blue, so let's use something not blue. Y'all holler out something.
Green.
Green, good. We'll do kind of a darker green. Foresty green. Cool. Notice that that became my background color. I lost my layer 1. So when you do this, this will now become your background that you can work with. You can always change that, totally fine, totally okay. Then I need to place my scanned words inside of here. The easiest thing to do, got my scanned image here, is I'm going to use my move tool, and I'm so glad they changed the icon of the move tool. Did anybody notice this on the news update? The move tool used to be a black arrow, and like 99% of all new people learning this pick the wrong black arrow to move something around. So now they just made it the little cross arrows. But I got my move arrow. You can click on it, drag it into your new document, and when I let go, it'll be placed inside of here. Notice how whopping huge it is. That's okay. You want a large image. You want to be able to scale it and be able to work with it as well. Since I drug it directly from a Photoshop document into a new one, it didn't make this as a smart object layer. If I had saved this to my desktop and then drug it in, you know it will create a smart object for this one. So pay attention when that comes up. Now let's have some fun. Let's scale this down. I'm going to hit Command 0 so I can see the whole thing. I do need to rotate it. And let's place it on here. Someplace right there. We'll say that's good. Lock that in. Large so y'all can see it. The next thing I need to do is I need to be able to remove the white of the paper. And there's a variety of different ways that we can do this. Some are a lot easier, some are more difficult. Some involve several tools. I'm going to show you the absolute gosh darndest easiest way to do this. And a lot of people don't recognize it because they never play around with Photoshop. They just go with whatever they learn. Playing around with Photoshop, you've always opened up the layer effects, right? And maybe you've paid attention to all the different fun stuff you can do on this side. The first option, however, is your blending mode. Or excuse me, your blending options style. And as technical as this looks, you can do a lot with these blending options from here. What we're going to do is we're going to tell this layer to ignore the white of the layer that we have. In this case, the white of the paper. To do this, at the very bottom, it's blend if, we're going to keep it gray, this layer, and then it gives you a range of black to white. We're not going to worry about the underlying layers, what's below it. We're only going to worry about this one. And we're going to get rid of the white area of it. To do this, we're just going to drag this arrow to the left, and you can kind of see the preview happening. Watch what happens as I pull it to there. See it disappear? Really, really cool. See how easy that was? I didn't have to choose a single other tool. I'm just using this. Now, by dragging this back and forth on its own, it kind of is a little bit fuzzy. It doesn't give me perfect results. You can still see some of the white. It doesn't blend very well. It's giving me a good sharp edge to this. And if I just had just black and just white, that would be okay. But since I'm using an actual photograph of something, and this has a little bit shades of gray, I would love to be able to differentiate and get a little bit more blending into this. Here's the second thing to keep in mind. This time, I'm going to hold down my Option key as I click on this. See how it's split apart? Now, it's going to actually blend that into there. And I'm going to move this. It does take a little bit of time. This will give you much better results for how your object should look than just keeping them together. So hold down Option and split apart your white area. And that will do that. And we'll say, okay, let's check out what I got. Let's move my layers back to where they are. I've isolated the word design. From here, now I can start to add embellishments to it. I can add colors, I can do different things. But there is some things you got to keep in mind when doing this. Now, I did lose some of my details, that's okay. And it's still just one color, it's black. I would like to be able to edit this and work with it. Let's see, next page. Isolated the individual letters. If you did scan multiple letters and you need to move them into place or move them around, you would need to repeat this process for each individual letter. If you liked one kind of letter and you wanted to isolate it, maybe you need to use a layer mask to mask out that layer, and so you can place them together. Did I lose anybody when I said that? I'm not going to demo that since I don't have anything to demo. But you can use layer mask to do that. I removed the white of the paper. Let's add a gradient of color on top of this. Let's see. Oh, nope. Before I do that, let me show you last thing I need to do. If I wanted to add a gradient to this particular color, and I used a gradient overlay on this layer, here's what's going to happen. Uh-oh. Now I'll make it an obvious gradient. It's not going over just my letters. What's it doing? Going over the whole thing. The styles still recognize this whole layer as one big scan. It's not picking up that I have transparency where the white is. So it's not really playing fair with this. There's a couple of things you can do. You can either change the blending mode of the style. Right now it's in normal. If I was to choose, I believe it's screen, it'll start picking up the darker areas. Now it's still picked up the lighter areas. Let's play around. Maybe color dodge. Yeah, color dodge does a better job. It sort of picks it up since I have black and white. I could, no, that's definitely not going to do it. Multiply, no. So blending modes are one way you could potentially add color or something else to it. What I really want to do is I just want to make the white completely transparent. So I'm going to get rid of the gradient map. Instead, I'm going to trick Photoshop into accepting these transparent pixels, to getting rid of the white that we did. Here's how I'm going to trick it. I'm going to make a new layer on top of this one. Just a new transparent layer, layer 2. Then I'm going to merge both of these layers together. Whenever you merge layers in Photoshop, however it appears is how it will accept those pixels. So any kind of blending mode, or in this case transparency mode, I've selected both of them, will stay there. You can choose the top here, and usually it's towards the bottom. There it is. Merge layers, Command E is the keyboard shortcut. I don't want to merge visible, and I certainly don't want to flatten all my layers. Just the 2 layers that I have selected will give me this. And you can kind of get an idea. It's just a solid transparent layer, and all that I have left is the pixels that I'm working with. Did I lose anybody? Pretty cool? Okay. Now, let's go back and add that gradient overlay like I want. There it is. Works really cool. Works well that way. If you don't want to do the gradient overlay as a layer style, remember you can also add drop shadows, you can get funky with it. You could do it as a clipping path. If you remember how to do clipping paths, I'm going to make a new layer. What do I hold between the 2 layers? Does anybody remember that? Anybody's taking my illustration class? Option, yes. If you hold down Option, you get this little icon. Anything now that I've placed inside of layer 3, notice I get a little arrow pointing to it, will be masked inside of this layer. Here's what that means. I'm going to grab my gradient tool. Let's choose that psychedelic. There we go. I'm going to make a gradient inside of layer 3, but it's masked out in layer 2. The best thing about this is I can, whatever I put in layer 3, whatever I put inside of this mask will be masked inside of here. So I could potentially, move it around as necessary. I could put a picture inside of it and move it around. Let's do that. Tell you what, I'm going to take a real quick screenshot of my desktop. Let's say I wanted that to be inside the word design. I can drag it into here.
So you just did a new layer and you did your options.
Exactly, bingo. So let's say instead of a gradient map, I wanted this picture of the Tetons, to be clipped to it. I did it real quick. Hold down Option, click on it, and now the Grand Tetons is inside of the word design. It's really, really cool. Once you understand clipping mask and layer mask, those are 2 major things that you can do in Photoshop to add quick styles to what you're working with. Whatever you want to, and again, I can move it around and place it exactly because it's its own layer. And this is difficult to do in Illustrator. A lot of people want to do this kind of thing in vector form. You don't have to use vectors. Use pixels. Use Photoshop. This is where it comes out to be. Okay. And I can get more funky with it. Ooh, let's try something. I'm going to duplicate Now I'm just playing around. This doesn't have to be part of yours. If you unmask something, so I made a copy of this when I unmasked it, I'm going to let this be part of my background. It'll make it a little bit bigger. This is kind of a new quirky style a lot of people are doing. You can kind of sort of see that back there. Maybe if I change my blending mode to pick up some of the green, so now I've got this going on. It's a fun thing that you can do with it. But all I'm doing is I'm working within my layers. In this case, I'm really only using like 4 different layers to work with to very easily, very quickly make my own hand lettering style from this. I did save this as a video so y'all can go back and rewatch me do this. What I'm looking for this exercise